At 21, Clara Whitfield had $43 in her jacket pocket, a canvas duffel bag with a broken zipper, and nowhere left to sleep. The apartment had gone first. Then, the job. Then the last person she'd thought would close a door on her had closed it anyway, and she'd stood on the sidewalk outside a county social services office in Harnett, Pennsylvania, on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, with dead leaves scraping past her boots and no plan beyond the next hour. She knew about the Windmill because a lawyer named Greer had mentioned it once, almost as an aside, in a room that smelled of carpet cleaner and old coffee. He'd said the words, assessed at approximately $8, and moved on before she could ask a follow-up question, and she'd filed it somewhere in the back of her mind like a receipt you don't throw away, even though you can't imagine needing it. Now, she needed it. But when she pried back the rusted access panel on the Windmill's inner shaft housing, on a gray November afternoon, alone, her fingers bleeding from the corroded edge of the steel, she found something her grandfather Harold Whitfield had spent nearly 30 years quietly sealing away. Something a man named Denton Creel had spent just as long making certain she would never find. The eviction hadn't come as a surprise exactly. Clara had been living on a sliding scale of almost okay for 2 years, the kind of almost okay that requires absolute stillness to maintain. And the moment she lost her job at the Harmon Street Diner, a Tuesday, the 1st of October, the shift manager handing her an envelope while the lunch crowd was still eating, the whole construction began to tip. Her name had been on the lease of a third-floor apartment in a building on Locust Street in Harnett for 14 months. The building was managed by a company called Steadfast Property Group, which was not a company that dealt in grace periods. She had until October 31st. She made it to October 28th because she was paying $611 a month out of savings that were down to $490, and the math did not require a calculator. The county social services office was a low beige building with fluorescent lighting and a water stain on the drop ceiling that looked like the state of Florida. She sat across a pressed particle board desk from a caseworker named Fran DeLuca, who was not unkind, but who had the particular stillness of someone who had run out of surprise years ago. Fran had reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She kept touching them when she was thinking, hooking her index finger through the chain and letting it go. Clara gave Fran the facts. 21. No current address. Previous employment terminated. Relevant family. None living in the county. Father deceased. Mother, out of contact since Clara was 16. Fran asked about other family. Clara said her grandfather had died 8 months ago. She said it the way you say the name of a street when you're giving directions. She wasn't trying to be cold. She just didn't have a container for it yet. Fran slid a resource packet across the desk. Shelters, food pantries, a workforce development center. She also slid a yellow sticky note with a phone number for Randall Greer, the attorney who had administered Harold Whitfield's estate. Clara recognized the name. She'd met Greer once, briefly, in February, at a meeting she hadn't fully understood the purpose of. Greer was a man in his late 50s with a habit of adjusting his watch band when he was about to say something he found distasteful. She remembered the watch adjustment clearly because he'd done it twice in the span of a minute, right before he told her the estate had a number of complications and that her grandfather's primary property, a small dairy operation on County Road 4 outside Mill Hollow, had already been absorbed into an outstanding lien by the time Harold died. What was left, Greer had explained while adjusting his watch band a third time, was a quarter-acre parcel out on Route 9. There was a collapsed windmill on the property. The county had assessed the structure at $8 due to demolition liability. Clara was named in the will as the beneficiary. She could accept or decline. There were no other assets. Clara had said she needed to think about it. She'd been thinking about it for 8 months without doing anything, which was a habit she recognized but hadn't broken. Now she called Greer from the parking lot of the social services building while the wind pushed a paper coffee cup past her feet. His receptionist found her name in the system. The deed transfer had never been finalized because Clara had never responded. Greer could have the paperwork ready by Thursday. Clara said Thursday was fine. She had $43 and no rent due anywhere. Thursday was extremely fine. She left the social services building with the canvas duffel on her shoulder and the resource packet folded under her arm. Inside the duffel, 3 changes of clothes, a pair of work gloves with the left palm stitched where she'd torn it, a dog-eared copy of a trail atlas she'd found at a thrift store, a travel-size tube of toothpaste, 2 granola bars, and a framed photograph of Harold Whitfield that she'd taken from the apartment when the rest of his things were donated. In the photograph, Harold was standing in front of something she'd never been able to identify. A tall wooden structure, grained dark, behind him in soft focus. He was squinting into the sun and not quite smiling, the way he looked in every photograph she'd ever seen of him. Like he was watching something none of the rest of them had noticed yet. She spent 2 nights in the transit shelter on Birch Avenue, which was warm and clean, and smelled of institutional soap, and which she was grateful for in a precise, practical way. On Thursday, she sat in Randall Greer's office, peach-colored walls, a rubber plant that had seen better years, and signed the deed transfer. Greer gave her a manila folder with the documents inside. He adjusted his watch band when he told her the structure would likely need to be demolished at her cost once the county got around to issuing the order, and that she should be aware there were no utilities connected to the parcel. "Is there a structure I can shelter in?" Clara asked. "Something standing." Greer consulted a page. The survey notes a small stone storage building on the northeastern edge of the parcel, approximately 12 by 14 feet. No running water. No electricity. Clara thanked him and took the folder and walked out into the gray October afternoon. She had $43 and a quarter-acre piece of land with a collapsed windmill and a 12 by 14 stone building, and she drove to it in a 1998 Ford Ranger she'd bought for $400 18 months ago. The odometer frozen at 184,000 miles. The heat working on the passenger side only if you held the vent with your hand. The drive from Harnett was 40 minutes on Route 9, which started as 2 lanes of maintained asphalt and gradually became 2 lanes of cracked asphalt, and then became 1 lane with the shoulder eaten by grass until it was barely a lane at all. And then County Road 4 broke off to the left, and she followed it another 1.5 miles, past a mailbox that leaned at 20 degrees, and a rusted gate standing open, the gate post listing into the weeds. And then the property was in front of her, and she stopped the truck and looked at it through the windshield for a long moment. The windmill was down. That much was obvious. The tower had folded at about 2/3 of its height, the steel lattice collapsing sideways into the field where it had lain for what looked like years, the blades warped and browned with oxidation. The concrete base remained, circular, cracked at one edge, with a rusted anchor bolt still threaded into one of the base plate holes, and a stub of the original center shaft, standing maybe 4 feet above the pad. The wooden rotor housing had come down with the tower and lay in the grass like something that had been dropped from a distance. The stone building was in the northeastern corner, where Greer's survey had noted it. It was 12 by 14, give or take, with a low door and 2 small windows, the glass in both windows intact, which surprised her. The mortar between the stones had crumbled in places, but the walls were standing plumb. The roof was metal, corrugated tin, dented in one spot but not breached. She sat in the truck for another minute. Then she got out. The door to the stone building opened on hinges that did not squeal. Clara noticed that immediately and stopped, hands still on the latch, looking at the hinges. They were old iron strap hinges, the kind you found on barn doors, long and tapered. But they were clean. Not clean like wiped down, but clean like someone had worked oil into them recently enough that the metal still had a faint sheen. She ran her thumb across the upper hinge. A thin coat of mineral oil, recent enough that no dust had settled into it. She filed that away. Inside, a 12 by 14 room with a concrete floor, the concrete rough-poured and level. A single wooden shelf ran the length of the north wall at shoulder height, bolted to the stone with lag screws. On the shelf, a propane camp lantern, a box of long matches, a folded wool blanket, a can of water-packed tuna, 2 cans of chickpeas, a paper bag with 4 packs of instant oatmeal, and a bar of plain soap in a tin dish. Beneath the shelf, on the floor, a 5-gallon water jug, full. Clara stood in the doorway and looked at all of it for a long moment. Someone had been here recently. Not today, not yesterday, but not months ago either. Someone had prepared this room for a person's arrival. The wool blanket was folded with the precision of someone who'd been in the military, the corners tucked under. The lantern had fuel in it. She shook it and heard the slosh. The water jug had a date written on the side in black marker in handwriting she recognized with a sudden, sharp feeling behind her sternum. Oct. 12. 2 weeks ago. 8 days before Harold Whitfield died. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. She stood there a moment, then she set down the duffel and lit the lantern with one of the long matches and made herself useful. She ate one of the cans of chickpeas cold, with the small folding spoon from her duffel, sitting on the concrete floor with the lantern beside her. Outside, the light faded, and the field around the collapsed windmill went from gray to darker gray to black. She pulled the wool blanket around her shoulders. She thought about Harold, and then she stopped thinking about Harold because the feeling behind her sternum was doing something she wasn't ready for. She slept on the concrete floor wrapped in the wool blanket, and she was warm enough. She spent the next 2 days doing a full assessment of the parcel, and doing it methodically, because methodical was the only mode she had. The stone building she designated shelter. Sound walls, sound roof, oil-hinged door. The collapsed windmill she walked around completely, noting the tower section lengths. 4 10-foot latticed sections of galvanized steel, the bolts corroded but present, the steel itself bent but not shattered in the collapse. The rotor housing was a separate problem, a hexagonal wooden structure, possibly original to the mill's construction in the 1940s based on the joinery style. Rough-sawn boards fitted with square-cut nails, the whole thing lying on its side in the field. She took notes on a yellow legal pad from the manila folder, turning the pages over to the blank sides. On the second afternoon, she spent an hour walking the concrete base of the windmill, crouching at the edges, running her hand along the surface. The center shaft stub, maybe 4 feet of 1-inch steel rod, still threaded into the base plate, had a housing around it. Not the original mechanical housing, which had come down with the tower. Something older. A separate housing, cast iron, bolted to the concrete pad with 4 anchor bolts, roughly cylindrical, about 14 inches in diameter and 18 inches tall, with a domed top that had been sealed with a bead of roofing compound. Clara had walked past it twice before she crouched and looked at it properly. The cast iron housing was dark with rust on the outside, but the rust was surface rust, the kind that forms from weather exposure without penetrating. She knocked on it with her knuckle. Solid. She pressed the flat of her palm against the dome. The roofing compound seal around the base of the dome was gray and cracked in places but unbroken. Someone had put this here intentionally, centered on the base plate, bolted through the concrete. The 4 anchor bolts were 5 8-inch hex head, the threads orange with rust, but the nuts still tight. She stood up and looked at the collapsed tower lying in the field, and then back at the housing on the pad. The tower had come down, and this thing had stayed standing. That was not an accident. You did not bolt a cast iron cylinder to a concrete pad with 4 anchor bolts and seal the dome with roofing compound unless you meant it to stay there and stay closed. She went back to the stone building and looked through the shelf. Among the items Harold had left, and she was certain now that Harold had left them, every one of them, was nothing that looked like a tool. She checked the floor along the walls, running her hand in the gap between the bottom course of stones and the concrete. Nothing. She lifted the water jug. Nothing beneath it. She went to the Ranger and opened the passenger door and reached behind the seat. In the space behind the passenger seat, she kept a canvas tool roll she'd assembled over 2 years of small repairs, paying for each tool when she could afford it. A 3/8-inch drive ratchet handle with the rubber grip worn smooth from use, a short extension, a set of 6-point sockets in metric and standard, a flat-blade screwdriver with a cracked yellow handle, a 10-inch adjustable wrench, and a cat's paw pry bar, 6 inches, which she'd found at an estate sale in a cardboard box for $2. She took the ratchet, the 9 to 16-inch socket, and the pry bar, and walked back to the Windmill base. The 9/16 fit the anchor bolts. The first one broke free after about 15 seconds of pressure, rust crackling off the threads as it turned. The second was harder. She leaned into the ratchet with her whole forearm and it held, then gave with a sound like a nail pulling from old wood. The third turned cleanly. The fourth was the problem. The head had corroded into a soft hexagon, the corners rounded down, and the 9/16 socket slipped on the first try. She switched to the adjustable wrench and got enough bite on 2 of the flats to break it free, her knuckles dragging across the concrete pad. She set the 4 nuts in the front pocket of her jeans. The dome did not lift easily. She worked the flat blade of the pry bar into the roofing compound seal around the base of the dome, working in small increments around the circumference the way you'd break the seal on a jar lid. The compound was old enough to crack and separate, but still adherent in places. She worked all the way around twice. Then she set the pry bar flat under the rim of the dome, applied slow upward pressure, and felt something give. Not a crack, not a snap. A soft, pressured release, like a lid unseating from a container that has held its breath for years. She lifted the dome free with both hands and set it on the concrete beside her. Inside the cast iron cylinder was a sealed metal box. Not a lockbox, not a fire safe. A simple rectangular tin, the kind a person might use for cookies or Christmas candy. Olive green with no decoration. The lid secured with 2 turns of black electrical tape that had dried and shrunk against the metal. The tin was maybe 10 inches long, 6 inches wide, and 4 inches deep. It fit the inside of the cylinder exactly. Clara looked at the fit, snug on all 4 sides, maybe a 1/4 inch of clearance. It had been made or chosen to fit this container precisely. She sat back on her heels on the concrete pad and looked at the tin box in the housing. Around her, the field was quiet. A crow crossed the sky far to the east. The grass in the field moved in a slow, even wave. The collapsed tower sections lay in the same positions they'd been lying in when she arrived, because nothing here had moved in a long time except her. She reached in with both hands and lifted the tin box out. It weighed more than she expected. Not heavy, but dense. She held it in her lap for a moment, feeling the weight of it, the slight give of the electrical tape under her thumb. She peeled the electrical tape away in 2 long strips. She pressed her thumbnails under the lid seam and worked it up. The lid resisted, then opened. Inside, a chamois cloth, folded twice. She unfolded it. Beneath the chamois, a brass key on a red tag. The key was old-fashioned, the bow a simple oval, the blade long and rectangular with 2 cuts. The tag was red cardstock, the corners soft from age, threaded through the key's bow on a short loop of waxed string. On the tag, in the same handwriting as the date on the water jug, 2 words in blue ballpoint. For Clara. Beneath the key, a small brown leather journal, the cover worn to a pale tan at the corners, a piece of red ribbon serving as a bookmark roughly 2/3 of the way through. She set the journal aside. Beneath the journal, a bundle of letters, 8 or 9 of them, bound with a thin rubber band that had fused to itself with age. The envelopes were plain white, sealed, each one addressed in blue ballpoint in Harold's particular handwriting, a forward-leaning print that became cursive for the longer words. The names on the envelopes were mostly names she didn't know. One said, Thomas Ackerman, Route 9. One said, B. Corliss, Mill Hollow. One said, Jimmy and Ruth, County Road 4. The last one in the bundle, smaller than the others, said, Clara. She sat on the concrete pad with the wind moving the grass around her, and she looked at her name on the envelope for a long moment. She pressed the pad of her thumb against the handwriting. The ink was old enough that it had sunk into the paper fiber and wouldn't smear. Harold had written this a long time ago. She opened the envelope carefully, running her thumbnail under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of ruled paper, folded in thirds. She unfolded it. The note was short. Harold's handwriting, the same forward-leaning print, pressed firmly enough that she could feel the indentations through the back of the page. She read it. Clara. If you're reading this, you found the box. That means you were paying attention, which means you turned out the way I hoped you would. This is not the whole story. The whole story is inside the building, and you'll need the key to find it. But I want to say one thing before you go looking. Your father and I had a disagreement that lasted most of his adult life. I was wrong about some of it, and he was wrong about some of it, and neither of us ever said so out loud. That is the thing I am most sorry for in my life. Not what I did or didn't do with the land or the money. The disagreement. That I let it sit. I have been putting things away for you since you were 4 years old. I did not tell your father because I did not know how to tell him without the disagreement getting in the way again. I kept meaning to resolve it first. I kept not resolving it. The key is for the building, not this building, the other one. You'll know which one. I am sorry for all the years I let the disagreement be more important than saying plainly, you are the best thing that ever came out of this family. And I knew it from the first time I watched you take a thing apart to see how it worked. More later. Go find the other building. Harold. Clara sat on the concrete pad next to the windmill base with the note held flat across both palms. The chamois cloth was on the concrete beside her. The tin box was open. The brass key with the red tag was in the cup of her right hand. The crow had come back and was sitting on the fence post at the edge of the property. She watched it without seeing it. She read the note a second time, then a third time. She pressed the page flat against the front of her jacket with both hands, holding it there. The light was going. The afternoon had the compressed quality of late October light, already thinking about being dark. She got up from the concrete pad slowly, like her knees had forgotten how, and carried the tin box with everything inside it back to the stone building. She lit the lantern. She made a cup of instant oatmeal with water from the 5-gallon jug, heating it on the small propane camp stove she'd found in the ranger's bed. She'd forgotten she'd stowed it there in August, bought for $3 at a church sale in Harnett. She ate the oatmeal standing up, looking at the brass key on its red tag, which she'd set on the wooden shelf beside the lantern. The other building. She didn't know what the other building was. There was no other building on this parcel. She'd walked every inch of it. She'd driven County Road 4 both directions from the property line. She hadn't seen another structure that could correspond to anything Harold would have access to. The journal. She hadn't read the journal. She sat down on the concrete floor with the lantern close and the journal in her hands, and she opened it to the first page. The first page said, Mill Hollow, 1991. Started March. She turned to the page marked by the red ribbon and read, The ribbon was placed at an entry dated August 14th, roughly 2 years before Harold died. The entry read, in its entirety, "The Aldrich place is ready. Locked as of today. Key sealed. I won't go back to it now. Let her find it when she needs it." She read the entry 3 times. Then she closed the journal and held it in both hands in the circle of lantern light. And outside the stone building, the field was fully dark, and the collapsed windmill was out there somewhere in it, invisible. And everything Harold had spent 30 years quietly building was somewhere she hadn't found yet. Waiting in the same patient way that Harold had always waited. Letting things sit. Letting her come to them in her own time, the way he'd always done. Which had maddened her when she was young, and which she now recognized, sitting on the concrete floor of his stone building with $43 in her pocket and his key in her hand, and his handwriting pressed against her chest, as the deepest form of faith one person can have in another. She set the journal on the shelf beside the key. She turned the lantern low. She lay down on the concrete floor and pulled the wool blanket around her and listened to the wind move through the collapsed lattice of the windmill tower, a low, intermittent sound like someone turning pages in another room. She did not sleep for a long time. She was up before the light. She'd slept eventually, the shallow sleep of cold concrete and unfamiliar quiet, and woke with the wool blanket pulled to her chin and the lantern burned out and the stone building holding the last of the night's cold in its walls. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, the rough underside of the corrugated tin roof, listening to the birds starting up in the field. Then she got up, folded the blanket with the same military precision Harold had used. She'd learned it from him without realizing she'd learned it, and opened the door into the gray pre-dawn. The field smelled of wet grass and iron. The collapsed windmill tower was just visible in the lifting dark, a horizontal shape against the paler sky. She stood in the doorway and drank water from the 5-gallon jug and ate a granola bar from her duffel and looked at the journal entry again in the growing light. "The Aldrich place is ready. Aldrich." She said the word out loud to the empty field. The field did not respond. She had the deed documents in the manila folder. She went through them sitting on the tailgate of the Ranger with the folder on her knees. The deed described the parcel on County Road 4, and nothing else. No mention of any other property in Harold's name. But Greer had handled the estate, and Greer had told her in February that Harold's primary property, the dairy operation on County Road 4, had been absorbed by the lien. He had not mentioned an Aldrich place. He had not mentioned anything by that name at all. She drove into Mill Hollow. Mill Hollow was the kind of town that had been shrinking for decades without quite disappearing. Main Street was 4 blocks of mixed commerce, a hardware store, a coin laundry, a diner with a neon open sign in the window, a dollar store in a building that had once been a pharmacy, and at the far end, a small post office in a building that looked like it had been built from the same stone as the county's oldest structures. A grain elevator stood at the edge of town to the south, its corrugated metal sides streaked white with age. Clara parked in front of the hardware store because the hardware store was the kind of place that held memory, and she needed someone who had memory. The store was called Fenwick Hardware, and it smelled of linseed oil and sawdust and the particular dry warmth of a building that runs its heat all winter without pause. The bell above the door rang when she entered, a small brass bell on a coiled spring, the kind that rings and then rings again softer as the door settles. She stood for a moment just inside the door, letting her eyes adjust from the low morning light outside to the amber interior. The store was a single long room with wooden floors and shelves running from floor to ceiling on both walls. The shelves organized with the deep, intuitive logic of someone who had spent a lifetime knowing where everything was. She saw lag screws sorted by length in clear-lidded bins, hose clamps on wire hooks by diameter, Romex cable coiled on a dowel rack near the back, rolls of plumber's tape, tins of flux, a display of pry bars and cat's paws that made her think of the one in her tool roll. At the far end of the room, behind a low glass-fronted counter, a woman was writing in a ledger with a ballpoint pen. She was in her mid-60s, broad-shouldered, with white hair cut short and practical, and reading glasses low on her nose. She wore a dark green canvas apron over a flannel shirt, the apron pockets sagging with small items, a stub pencil, a folding knife, a small tape measure. She did not look up when Clara entered. Clara walked to the counter and stood there. The woman finished the line she was writing. Then she looked up over her glasses. "Morning," she said. "Morning," Clara said. The woman looked at Clara for a moment in the way that certain people look at you, not evaluating exactly, but taking in information without comment. She looked at the canvas duffel over Clara's shoulder, at the worn knees of her jeans, at the work gloves she'd stuffed in her jacket pocket, at the grease shadow on the back of Clara's right hand from yesterday's work on the anchor bolts. "Coffee's in the back," the woman said. "Help yourself." There was a folding table against the back wall with a Mr. Coffee machine on it, an old one, the carafe orange-handled. Clara poured a cup into one of the ceramic mugs on the shelf above the machine. She drank it standing up, because it was very good coffee and because the warmth of it moved through her in a way that felt necessary. She came back to the counter. "I'm looking for information about a property, something called the Aldrich Place." The woman set down her pen. She took off her reading glasses and let them hang on the chain around her neck. "Who's asking?" she said. "Clara Whitfield. Harold Whitfield was my grandfather." The woman was still for a moment, not frozen, still in the way of someone absorbing something they've been half expecting. "Sit down," she said, and pointed to a wooden stool on Clara's side of the counter. Clara sat. "I'm Adeline Fenwick," the woman said. "Harold bought his hardware here for 40 years. Every lag screw, every anchor bolt, every can of roofing compound he ever used." She paused. "I'm sorry for your loss. He was a precise man. I respected that." "Thank you," Clara said. "I didn't know he had a granddaughter." "He didn't talk much about his family." "No," Adeline said. "He didn't." She folded her hands on the counter. "The Aldrich Place is on Route 9, about 2 miles east from where County Road 4 breaks off. Used to be the Aldrich family's general store, back when there was enough traffic on Route 9 to support one. The building's been empty for a long time, maybe 15 years since the last tenant. My grandfather had access to it." Adeline was quiet for a moment. "Harold came in here about 8 years ago and bought a specific list of materials. Lumber, specific dimensions. Finish-grade hardwood, which is not something we normally stock, but he paid for me to order it. Wood glue, clamps, a new set of chisels, a box of 4-penny cut nails, Danish oil, 2 quarts. She touched the chain of her glasses. I asked him what the project was. He said he was fixing up a building. Clara said nothing. I knew about the Aldrich building because my father had used it for storage in the 80s. The key to the front door was still on a hook in my back office because no one had ever come to collect it. She looked at Clara steadily. About 6 months after Harold bought all that lumber, he came in and bought 3 more quarts of Danish oil. He left the key on the counter one day and didn't pick it up again. I put it back on the hook. Clara pressed her palms flat on the counter. Is the key still there? Adeline stood and went to the back office. She was gone for maybe 45 seconds. She came back and set a key on the counter, old-fashioned, similar in style to the one on the red tag, but larger. The bow was a diamond shape. The blade was longer. She slid it across the counter to Clara. Clara looked at it. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and took out the brass key on the red tag. For Clara. And held it up. Adeline looked at both keys. She said nothing for a moment. "I think Harold's key is for something inside the building," Adeline said quietly. "Mine is just for the front door." Clara nodded. She held both keys in her closed fist. "Is there anything else you can tell me about what he was doing in there?" Adeline picked up her pen and then set it down again. "He came in once with a piece he'd made, showed it to me at the counter. A box, a jewelry box, I suppose you'd call it, though it was finer than that word suggests. Dovetail joints, hand-cut. You could see the precision of the cuts. The wood was cherry. He'd finished it with the Danish oil and it had come up warm and deep." She paused. "He asked me what I thought. I told him it was the finest piece of woodwork I'd seen outside of a museum." He nodded. He didn't say much. He put it back in the cloth bag he'd carried it in and walked out. Clara sat on the stool and looked at the 2 keys in her open palm. Adeline reached under the counter and brought up a flathead screwdriver, a 10-inch pry bar, and a can of penetrating oil. She set them on the counter next to Clara's coffee mug. "The front door lock is stiff," she said. "Give it a shot of oil first. Let it sit a minute before you try the key." "How much?" Clara said. "Bring it back when you're done," Adeline said and picked up her pen. Route 9 east of County Road. 4 was narrower than the approach from Harnett, the asphalt older and patched in strips, the tree line close on both sides. Clara drove slowly, watching the right shoulder. At what she estimated was 2 miles, the trees opened on the right side and she saw the building. It was a 1-story structure of wood frame construction, maybe 30 by 40 feet, with a covered porch running the full width of the front, the porch roof supported by 4 square posts. The wood was dark with age and weather, the clapboard siding gone gray, the porch steps sagging at the right end where a support post had settled. The windows were shuttered on the inside with plywood, no light showing. The sign bracket above the porch was empty, the sign itself long gone. She stopped the Ranger on the gravel shoulder and sat looking at it. The porch steps were sagging, but the porch boards themselves were solid. She tested them as she climbed, pressing her weight onto each one before committing to it. The front door was a heavy plank door, a simple latch with a keyhole below it. She sprayed penetrating oil into the keyhole from the can Adeline had lent her and stood back for a minute, watching the oil darken the metal around the keyhole. Then she tried Adeline's key. The lock turned on the second try, stiff through the full arc but not seizing. The latch lifted. The door swung inward on hinges that groaned exactly once and then were silent. The interior was dark, the plywood shutters blocking the morning light. Clara held up her phone and turned on the flashlight. She swept the light across the room. It was a single, large space, the original store layout, wood floors running the length of it. The walls still had the old store shelving in place, wooden shelves on iron brackets. There was a counter along the right wall. A doorway at the back led to what had been a storage room, and along the walls, on the shelves, under the counter, on every flat surface in the room, were pieces of furniture. She took one step forward and stopped. A rocking chair with a slatted back, the wood a warm honey brown, each slat the same width with the same gap between them. A blanket chest, 6 inches from the wall, the corners joined in hand-cut dovetails. A side table with turned legs, the turnings even and smooth. A mirror frame with a carved border, simple repeating cuts that caught the flashlight and threw small shadows. 2 wall shelves with mortise and tenon brackets. A writing desk with 3 small drawers, the drawer fronts fitted so precisely that she almost missed the seam. A set of 4 chairs, identical, ladder-back style, the seats woven in a herringbone pattern with flat reed. Every piece of furniture in the room had a small white card attached to it. She crossed to the nearest piece, the blanket chest, and looked at the card. It was tied through a small hole in the card's corner with a loop of white string. On the card, in Harold's handwriting, Clara. For the room you'll have someday when you stop moving. She stood very still. She moved to the rocking chair. Its card read, "For Clara." She always sat in mine when she was small. She thought I didn't notice. I noticed. She moved to the side table. Clara. Every room needs one thing to set a lamp on. The writing desk. Clara. She was always writing things down, even as a child, even when she thought no one was watching. The 4 ladder-back chairs. Clara. She'll need somewhere to put people she invites in when she gets there. She went to the back storage room where the door stood half open. Inside, stacked carefully against the wall, were wooden crates of a specific size, each one labeled in Harold's hand. She read the labels without opening them. Savings bonds, 1994, 2018. A second crate, legal documents, deed, trust, account. A third, smaller wooden box with a brass clasp. Key collection, read the letter first. She went back to the main room. She stood in the center of it, surrounded by 30 years of quiet, precise love. The rocking chair and the blanket chest and the writing desk and the chairs and the shelves. And the morning light was coming in now through the gap above the front door, and it fell in a single pale bar across the dusty floor and touched the honey-brown arm of the rocking chair. Clara Whitfield pressed the back of both hands against her eyes and stood there, not moving for a long time. The third crate, key collection, read the letter first, had a brass clasp that opened with the key from the red tag. Inside the crate, on top of a tray of additional keys she did not examine yet, was a sealed envelope. Larger than the one inside the Windmill's tin box, heavier, her name on the front. She carried it to the rocking chair and sat down. The chair moved under her weight with the smooth, patient arc of a well-made thing. She opened the envelope. Inside were 4 pages, ruled, written front and back. Harold's handwriting, dated in the top right corner of the first page. August 2nd. She read, "Clara, by the time you read this, I expect I'll be gone a while. I don't write this to be dramatic. I write it because there are things I should have said to your face and didn't, and saying them on paper is a failure of nerve that I am old enough to admit. I want to tell you the full story, or as much of it as I can manage in the time I have left to write. My hand tires more quickly than it used to. Bear with me. Your grandmother, Ruth, died in 1987. You never knew her. She died before your father and mother met, before you existed. What I have never told anyone, not your father, not anyone, is that when Ruth died, she left behind a small amount of money, not a great sum. $11,000 in a savings account I didn't know she had. She had been adding to it for 12 years, starting from nothing, and when I found it after she was gone, I sat with the bank book for a week before I decided what to do with it. I could have spent it. The dairy was struggling then. I could have put it into the operation and not felt wrong for doing so. But I couldn't. The money felt like something Ruth had been building toward, though I didn't know toward what. She was a woman who planned quietly. She was better at it than I was. So I put the money in a separate account and I left it alone. Your father, James, was 23 in 1987. We were already disagreeing by then, though the disagreement had not yet become what it became. He wanted to sell the dairy and I wouldn't hear it. He wanted to move to the city. I thought that was a failure of character, which I now know was wrong of me. It was just a different life than the one I had chosen, and I had no right to call it lesser. James left in 1989. He was 25. We spoke on the phone occasionally for the first few years, and then less often, and then barely at all. When you were born in 2002, he called to tell me. I didn't know what to say, and so I said very little, which he took as disapproval. Which it was not. I was simply not able to say quickly the things that would have required years of groundwork to say. I said I was glad. That was true. I was deeply glad. I found out you existed as a real and specific person and not just a fact when you were 4 years old. Your father brought you here once, to this property. Not the dairy, this property, which I had acquired from the Aldrich estate in 1999 for back taxes. He brought you on a Saturday in July. I don't know what he intended by coming. We didn't speak much that day, but I watched you. You were 4 years old, and you found a loose board on the porch, and you worked at it for 40 minutes with a piece of scrap metal you'd found in the grass, trying to lever it up to see what was underneath. You weren't frustrated. You were interested. You treated the board as a problem that had a solution, and the solution was worth finding, and the time it required was just part of finding it. I knew then what Ruth's money was for. I opened a separate account that Monday in your name, a trust account, with the help of a lawyer in Harnett named Bauer, who has since retired. I deposited Ruth's original $11,000. I have been adding to it every year since then. Not large amounts. What the dairy could spare, which was sometimes nothing, and sometimes $200, and sometimes, in a good year, $800. I also purchased savings bonds in your name over 24 years. The bonds are in the crate marked accordingly. The account balance as of July 15th of this year was $61,400. I am telling you the number plainly because I know you are practical. $61,400, that is Ruth's $11,000 plus 24 years of what the dairy could spare plus 24 years of bonds. It is not a fortune. It is a foundation. Now I want to tell you about the disagreement with your father, because you deserve to know the shape of it. James called me in 2009. You were 7. He told me he had been diagnosed with a condition of the liver. He told me the doctors were optimistic. He did not ask me for anything. I wanted to say, "Come home." I didn't say it. I was afraid he would refuse, and that would make the distance permanent in a way it wasn't yet. So I said I was sorry to hear it, and I asked him to keep me informed, and he said he would. And he didn't. That was the last real conversation we had. He died in 2011. You were 9. I know you know this. What I don't know is whether anyone told you that I tried to come. I called the number I had for him, and there was no answer. I didn't have a number for your mother. I didn't know your address. I went to Harnett and I asked at the county records office, and they couldn't help me. I drove the streets of Harnett for 2 afternoons looking for, I don't know what, a sign, your face in a window. I didn't find you. I have carried that failure for 13 years, the finding of you, or the not finding. I should have tried harder. I should have hired someone. I should have done more than drive the streets like a man who has already accepted he won't succeed. That is the thing I am most sorry for. Not the disagreement, not the silence. The 2 afternoons in Harnett when I could have found you and didn't, because some part of me was afraid of what I would find. And that fear was a cowardice I have no excuse for. You are 21 years old, or close to it if my counting is right. You have had a harder time of it than you should have, and most of that is because 2 stubborn men let a disagreement outlast their own good sense. Here is what I want you to know. The furniture in this room I made for you. Each piece took as long as it took. I was not in a hurry. I had a picture in my mind of the home you would eventually have, and I built for that picture. The rocking chair I made first in 1999, the same year I acquired this building, because it was the piece I could see most clearly. You used to fall asleep in mine when you were small, in the time before the distance became what it became. I don't know if you remember that. I hope you do. The deed to this building is in the crate marked legal documents. It is yours. The account information and bond certificates are also there. Bauer's successor, a woman named Helen Marsh in Harnett, has the trust documents and will release them on proof of identity. Her number is on a card inside the legal documents crate. The brass key opens the key box in the smaller crate. The keys in that box are for various things I have locked up over the years. A storage unit in Harnett, a post office box on Route 11, the padlock on the stone building's inner floor hatch, which I probably should have mentioned earlier. There is a second wool blanket under the hatch. A better one. I didn't want to put it out where it might get damp. I want to say one more thing and then I will stop, because my hand is tired, and because I have been trying to say this sentence for 20 years, and the longer I wait, the worse it gets. I know you turned out the way you did without any help from me. I know that whatever you have built in yourself, the steadiness, the attention, the patience with difficult problems, you built it yourself from scratch, without a grandfather who showed up when it counted. I know that. And I want you to know that I watched, from the distance that was my own fault. And I was proud of you every single year, and I loved you every single day. And I am sorry it took a sealed tin box and a collapsed windmill to tell you so. The rocking chair is yours. You earned it. Harold. August 2nd. Clara sat in the rocking chair for a long time after she finished reading. She read it twice. Then she folded the pages with care, running her thumbnail along each fold to make it clean, and she slid them back into the envelope. She held the envelope in both hands, resting it across her thighs. The morning light had shifted while she read. It was coming through the gap above the door at a lower angle now, which meant time had passed, more than she'd registered. The bar of light lay across the floor differently than it had when she arrived. Warmer now, touching the leg of the blanket chest. She looked around the room at the furniture Harold had made her. The rocking chair moved in its quiet arc when she shifted her weight. She looked at the card on the blanket chest from where she sat. For the room you'll have someday when you stop moving. She thought about a 4-year-old working at a loose board with a piece of scrap metal for 40 minutes. She thought about 2 afternoons in Harnett, a truck moving through streets, a man looking for a face in a window. She pressed the envelope against her chest with both arms folded across it. Outside, the day was doing what November days do, going gray and then going grayer, the light shortening. She was aware of it without being moved by it. Eventually, she got up and opened the crates. She read the account information. She found the card for Helen Marsh. She counted the savings bonds, which were organized by year in labeled envelopes, and totaled, by her rough count, what the account information suggested. She looked at the deed to the building, which named Harold George Whitfield as grantor, and was made out in Clara Jean Whitfield's name as grantee, dated August 3rd, the day after he'd finished the letter. He'd transferred the deed the day after he wrote the letter. And then, 6 days later, he had died. She set the deed back in the crate and put the lid on. She stood in the center of the room with her hands at her sides. She looked at each piece of furniture in turn, the rocking chair, the blanket chest, the side table, the mirror, the wall shelves, the writing desk, the 4 ladder-back chairs. She went back to the rocking chair and sat down again. The light faded outside. She didn't get up to turn on anything. There was nothing to turn on. She sat in the rocking chair in the darkening room and listened to the building settle around her and the wind move along the porch boards outside, and eventually she slept, upright in the chair, with the letter in its envelope held against her chest and her feet flat on the floor Harold had refinished, the boards smooth and level beneath her boots. If you've made it this far into Clara's story, hit subscribe, because what happens next is the part I've been waiting to tell you. She woke in the full dark to the sound of tires on gravel. Headlights swept across the plywood-shuttered windows, 2 bright lines moving from left to right, and then went still. She heard a car door open and close with the quiet precision of a well-maintained vehicle. She heard footsteps on the porch boards, unhurried. A knock at the front door. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. not aggressive, almost ceremonial. Clara stood, set the envelope on the seat of the rocking chair, and opened the door. The man on the porch was in his early 50s, medium height, wearing a dark wool overcoat over a gray suit. The suit was pressed. His shoes were leather, dress shoes, recently polished, and now carrying a thin line of gravel dust along each sole from the walk across the parking area. He had a business card in his right hand, held out at the level of a handshake. "Miss Whitfield," he said. "I'm sorry to come at this hour. My name is Denton Creel. I represent Harlan Development Partners." Clara did not take the card. She looked at it, then at him. "I've been aware of this property for some time," Creel said. He had a smooth, neutral voice, the voice of someone who had learned to take the edges off things. "We've been hoping to have a conversation with the estate. Now that the deed transfer is settled, I wanted to introduce myself in person." "How do you know the deed transfer is settled?" Clara said. Creel smiled in the way people smile when they find a question charming rather than serious. "We stay current on county records. It's the nature of the work." He extended the card again. This time Clara took it. She looked at it without expression. Harlan Development Partners, a Stone Ridge, PA address, a phone number, and Creel's name above the title Regional Acquisitions Director. "We'd like to make an offer on the property," Creel said. "I won't pretend it's extravagant. The structure needs significant work, and the Route 9 corridor has challenges, but we think it represents a fair valuation." He reached inside his coat and produced a folded paper. He held it out. Clara took it and opened it. The number at the top was $18,000. She folded it again and held it in the same hand as his business card. "What do you plan to do with it?" she said. "The company is looking at a stretch of Route 9 for light commercial development. This parcel would be part of a larger assemblage." He paused. "The building itself would likely need to come down." Clara looked at him steadily. He had very clean hands. He was watching her with the attentive, patient look of a man who was accustomed to waiting out people who were thinking. "No," she said. Creel nodded, as though this were the expected first answer. "I understand. It's a significant decision. I don't expect you to answer tonight." He reached into his coat again and produced a second card, this one handwritten with a different number. "That's my personal number. And I'll say this, Miss Whitfield. The county has been in conversations about the Route 9 corridor for some time, zoning reviews. There may be changes coming that would affect what you're able to do with a commercial structure out here. It's worth being aware of." He said it pleasantly. He said it the way you mention the weather. "Good night," Clara said. "Good night," Creel said. He put his hands in his coat pockets and walked back down the porch steps to the car, which was a dark blue Volvo sedan, new enough that the gravel dust on the fender looked out of place. He drove away without hurrying, the headlights sweeping out onto Route 9 and then diminishing to the east. Clara stood in the open doorway and watched the taillights until they were gone. She looked down at the two things in her hand, Creel's business card and the folded paper with the number $18,000 on it. She thought about 30 years of savings bonds and an $11,000 start that Ruth Whitfield had built in secret. She thought about a rocking chair made first in 1999 because Harold could see it most clearly. She thought about the words zoning conversations and the particular neutrality with which Creel had delivered them, the way you put a hand on a door frame when you want someone to feel the door is still open while making it clear it could close. She set both items on the side table Harold had made. Every room needs one thing to set a lamp on. She went back to the rocking chair and picked up the letter in its envelope and held it in her lap. She sat in the dark with the building around her and the furniture Harold had spent years making standing in the shadows at the edges of the room, patient as everything he had ever done, waiting for her to decide. The formal letter arrived on a Monday. Clara had been sleeping in the Aldrich building for 6 nights by then, on a folded moving blanket she'd bought for $11 at the dollar store in Mill Hollow. The wool blanket from Harold's crate laid over it. She'd been using the writing desk Harold made by lamplight in the evenings, working through the legal documents in the crate, making notes on the yellow legal pad. She'd called Helen Marsh, the attorney in Harnett, on the second day. Marsh had a careful, unhurried voice and said she could have the trust paperwork ready for Clara's signature by the following week. She said the account balance, with accumulated interest, was $61,100 and some change. She said it plainly, the way you say a distance in miles. Clara had sat with the phone against her ear for a moment after Marsh said the number, looking at the rocking chair across the room. The formal letter arrived on Monday, November 14th, tucked under the windshield wiper of the Ranger, while Clara was inside the building. She found it when she came out mid-morning to get the adjustable wrench from her tool roll. It was on county letterhead. The subject line read, "Notice of Zoning Review, Route 9 Corridor, Parcel 14C00007. It informed her that the Mill Hollow Township Zoning Board had scheduled a review of commercial parcels along Route 9 for proposed reclassification to a highway commercial overlay district. The review would include a public hearing. The hearing was set for December 3rd. Any property owner wishing to speak to the status of their parcel was invited to submit written comment or appear in person. It was worded carefully. It did not say her parcel would be rezoned. It did not say it wouldn't be. It said, in the dense, neutral language of official documents, that things were in motion and that she was invited to watch them move. She read it twice standing beside the Ranger, the cold air moving down Route 9, and then she folded it along its original creases and put it in the manila folder with the deed documents. She stood with her hand on the Ranger's door handle and thought about $18,000 and the word assemblage and Denton Creel's polished shoes on Harold's porch boards. And she thought about what it would mean to take the offer. $18,000 and $61,400 in the trust and the savings bonds. She could go somewhere. She could start something smaller and less complicated. She could not be here in a building on Route 9 with a zoning review coming and a developer who already knew her name before she'd unlocked the front door. She got in the truck. She sat with her hands on the steering wheel and the engine off. The manila folder was on the passenger seat. The key on the red tag was in her jacket pocket. She could feel the weight of it. She thought about a 4-year-old and a loose board and a piece of scrap metal and 40 minutes of patient, interested work. She got out of the truck. She drove to Fenwick Hardware. Adeline Fenwick was behind the counter when Clara came through the door, the brass bell ringing twice. She was reading something in a 3-ring binder, running her finger down a column of figures. She looked up over her glasses. Clara set the pry bar and the screwdriver on the counter. "Returning these," she said. Adeline looked at the tools and then at Clara. "You look like you slept in a chair," she said. "Rocking chair," Clara said. "It's a good one." Adeline closed the binder. She looked at Clara for a moment with the same reading look she'd used on the first morning. "What did you find in there?" Clara told her. Not all of it, not the financial details, but the shape of it. The furniture, the crates, the letter. She said it plainly, standing at the counter, and Adeline listened without interrupting, which was a quality Clara was beginning to understand was Adeline's particular form of respect. When Clara finished, Adeline was quiet for a moment. She took off her glasses and held them loosely in one hand. "I want to show you something," Adeline said. She came out from behind the counter and walked to the back of the store, to a shelf near the Romex cable rack. She reached up and took down a small wooden box, maybe 8 inches square, the kind used for index cards. She set it on the shelf at eye level and opened the lid. Inside was a collection of small items: a receipt, a folded note, a photograph, a small carved wooden bird. Adeline picked up the photograph and held it out to Clara. It was a black and white photograph, old but well preserved, of a man standing in front of Fenwick Hardware. The man was in his 40s, heavy-set, wearing a work coat, squinting against the same sun that everyone squinted against in photographs from that era. On the back, in a handwriting Clara did not know. Aldrich store opening, 1953. "That's my father," Adeline said. "Cornelius Fenwick. He opened this store in 1955, 2 years after the Aldrich store closed." She paused. The Aldrich family sold their store because they couldn't compete with the highway traffic going away from Route 9. The building sat empty for years. My father used to say it was a shame because it was a good building. Clara held the photograph. "Harold came in here for the first time in 1982, Adeline said. "He bought a box of 16-penny sinker nails and a roll of 15-pound felt. He was fixing the dairy barn roof. He paid cash. He said thank you when he left, and he said it like he meant it." She took the photograph back and set it in the box. "He came in every few weeks after that, for 40 years. He never bought more than he needed, and he never asked for credit, and he always said thank you when he left." She closed the lid of the box and put it back on the shelf. "He came in the week before he died," Adeline said. She said it directly, looking at Clara. "He bought a quart of mineral oil. He asked me if I still had the key to the Aldrich building. I told him I did. He nodded. He said he hoped it would be of use to someone." She paused. "I think he meant you." Clara put both hands flat on the edge of the nearby shelf and looked at the floor for a moment. She pressed her lips together. She looked up. "There's a zoning hearing," she said, "December 3rd. Adeline nodded once, slowly. "What do I do?" Clara said. "You show up," Adeline said, "and you let people know you're going to show up." She went back behind the counter and picked up her pen. "I'll make some calls." Clara drove back to the Aldrich building and spent the rest of that day and the next 3 days doing what she knew how to do. She worked. She started with the porch steps, which needed the sagging support post reset and the 2 rotted treads replaced. She found dimensional lumber at the Fenwick yard. Adeline had opened the attached lumber shed without being asked, pointing to the framing stock and saying, "Use what you need and write it down." And she cut 2 new treads with a handsaw and reset the post with a length of 4 core and 2 galvanized post bases she paid $7.40 for. She checked the post with a plumb level, borrowed from the hardware store's rental rack. It was plumb on both axes. She nailed the treads with 16-penny sinkers, countersunk, and filled the holes with exterior wood putty. She pried the plywood off the interior of the windows, letting the light into the main room for the first time in years. The light changed the room entirely. The furniture Harold had made came up warm and distinct in the afternoon sun. The cherry wood of the blanket chest going amber, the ladder-back chairs casting clean shadows on the floor. She swept the floor 3 times with a broom she found in the back storage room. She wiped down every piece of furniture with a damp cloth and then a dry one. She pulled years of grime from the window glass with a rag and a spray bottle of diluted white vinegar. She found a crack in the mortar between 2 window sills and mixed a small batch of hydraulic cement from a bag in the lumber shed and packed it with a putty knife. She slept in the rocking chair each night with the letter beside her on the side table Harold had made. She kept a propane lantern burning low on the writing desk after dark. She ate peanut butter from a jar she'd bought for $3.29 at the dollar store, on bread standing at the counter along the right wall, and she drank instant coffee from a camp mug and thought about what it would take to make this room what Harold had envisioned it as when he'd built the furniture for it. On November 19th, she drove to Harnett and signed the trust documents in Helen Marsh's office. Marsh was a woman in her mid-40s with a direct manner and a good handshake. She walked Clara through every document. The account would be accessible within 5 business days. The bonds were negotiable through any branch of the issuing bank. The deed to the Aldrich building was registered and clean. Clara drove back to Mill Hollow in the Ranger with the signed copies in the manila folder and $43 still in her jacket pocket, because she hadn't spent any of it. She'd been living on the food Harold had stocked and what she could buy with the $11 moving blanket and the $3.29 peanut butter and the $7.44 post bases. She was keeping the $43 as a kind of marker. She didn't know what it marked. She just wasn't ready to spend it. On November 22nd, a Tuesday morning, she was on the porch re-nailing a loose fascia board when a truck came down Route 9 and turned onto the gravel shoulder and stopped. Not a new truck. A 2001 Chevrolet Colorado, green, the left rear quarter panel a different shade of green where it had been replaced, the bed covered with a tarp. The engine ran for a moment after the driver put it in park and then coughed quiet. The driver's door opened and a girl got out. She was young, 17, maybe 18, in a gray hoodie that was too large and jeans that were too short, the hems sitting above her ankle bones. She was carrying a backpack by one strap. She had the specific look of someone who has been in motion for long enough that stillness feels suspicious, the way a person who has been cold for days keeps their shoulders raised even when they're inside. The girl looked at the building. She looked at Clara on the porch. She didn't move toward the building or away from it. "I'm not looking for trouble," the girl said. "I know," Clara said. The girl looked at the porch steps, the new treads. Then she looked at the door. "I've been driving since Colton," the girl said. "I saw the light in the window last night from the road." Clara came down the new porch steps and looked at the girl directly, the way Adeline had looked at her on the first morning, taking in information without comment. The too large hoodie, the short jeans, the backpack with one strap, the Colorado with the mismatched quarter panel. "You eaten today?" Clara said. The girl shook her head. "Come in," Clara said. She made 2 peanut butter sandwiches and poured 2 cups of instant coffee and set them on the blanket chest because the writing desk was covered in papers. She didn't ask the girl's name or her story or where she was going. The girl ate the sandwich in 4 bites and drank the coffee and looked at the furniture in the room, the rocking chair, the side table, the wall shelves, without asking about it. After a minute, she said, "Did you make all this?" "My grandfather," Clara said. The girl nodded. She held the coffee mug with both hands. "My name's Vera," she said. "Clara," Clara said. They sat for a while in the morning light, not saying much. The room warm from the propane heater Clara had set up in the corner, the furniture standing in the same patient light it had been standing in since Harold built it. The hearing was on December 3rd, a Thursday, at 7 p.m. in the Mill Hollow Township building, which was a low brick structure with a parking lot that filled up faster than Clara expected. She arrived at 6:30 and sat in the back row. The room was a meeting room with folding chairs arranged in rows facing a raised table where 5 board members would sit. The fluorescent lighting was the same pale blue-white as every municipal room she'd ever been in. She had the deed and the trust documents in the manila folder on her lap. By 6:45, the room was almost full. She recognized almost none of the people. But she saw Adeline Fenwick come in at 6:50 and sit 2 rows ahead, her green canvas apron exchanged for a wool coat, but the same reading glasses on the same beaded chain. Adeline did not look back at Clara. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and her back straight. At 6:55, 5 more people came in together, all of them older, all of them with the particular look of people who have spent their lives working with their hands. The weathered skin, the deliberate way they moved, taking up space without apology. One of them, a heavy-set man in a red flannel shirt, caught Clara's eye and nodded once. She didn't know him. Denton Creel came in at 7:01 and sat in the front row. He was in the same wool overcoat. He had a leather document folio on his knees, and he set it flat and rested both hands on it, relaxed, the posture of a man on familiar ground. The board members filed in. 5 of them, a chairwoman, and 4 members. The chairwoman was a woman in her 60s, named, according to the name placard, Dorothy Hess. She called the meeting to order and laid out the agenda. The zoning review of the Route 9 corridor, specifically parcels 14C-074 through 14C-081. Public comment would follow the staff presentation. The staff presentation was delivered by a county planner named Barrett, who stood at a projection screen and described the proposed highway commercial overlay district using the language of planning documents. Floor area ratios, setback modifications, permitted uses by right. Clara wrote nothing down. She understood the shape of what was being proposed, a zone classification that would make it easier to consolidate parcels, easier to demolish existing structures, easier for a developer to assemble the corridor into something that had nothing to do with what was already there. When Barrett finished, Hess opened the floor for public comment. Creel stood first. He was smooth and brief. He described Harlan Development Partners' interest in the corridor. He named projected tax revenue figures. He talked about job creation in general terms. He said the proposed overlay district was a thoughtful approach to a corridor with significant economic potential. He sat down. Hess asked if there were other comments. She was looking at the room. The heavy-set man in the red flannel shirt stood up. He introduced himself as Roy Tabbert, retired electrician, resident of Mill Hollow for 51 years. He said he wanted to speak about the Aldrich building specifically. He said he'd known Harold Whitfield for 32 years. He said that Harold had paid, out of pocket, to have Roy rewire the dairy barn in 1994, when Roy was going through a bad year and needed the work, and had paid him more than the job was worth, and said nothing about it. He said Harold had done the same kind of thing for a number of people in Mill Hollow over the years, quietly, without announcement. He said the Aldrich building belonged to Harold's granddaughter now, and that he would be interested to know what she intended to do with it, because if it was something good, he intended to help. He sat down. A woman with garden soil still visible under her fingernails stood up next. She gave her name as B. Corliss. Clara recognized the name from the envelopes in the tin box. B. Corliss, Mill Hollow. She said she'd lived on Route 9 for 40 years and that Harold Whitfield had repaired her fence line 3 times after storm damage without being asked and without billing her. She said the Route 9 corridor did not need another commercial strip. She said it needed the kind of thing that made a town rather than a highway. She sat down. A thin older man in a canvas work coat, Thomas Ackerman. Thomas Ackerman, Route 9 was, stood and said he had nothing eloquent to add to what had been said, but that Harold Whitfield had delivered firewood to his house every November for 15 years after Thomas's wife got sick, and he couldn't manage the cutting himself, and that Harold had never once accepted payment, and that a man like that deserved to have his property treated with respect. Ackerman sat. Then Adeline Fenwick stood up. She did not look at her notes. She stood with her hands at her sides and looked at the board. "I've been running Fenwick Hardware on Main Street in this town for 26 years, she said. "My father ran it for 30 years before that. In that time, I have watched this town change in every way towns change. Businesses close, people leave, the road gets quieter. Harold Whitfield was one of the constants. He bought what he needed, and he built what he could, and he gave what he had to spare. And he did all of it without telling anyone. The Aldrich building was his project for 30 years. He fixed it up quietly, the way he did everything. His granddaughter is 21 years old. She arrived here with nothing, and she has already reset the porch posts and filled the window mortar and made the building livable. I have watched her work. She has her grandfather's hands." She paused for a moment. "I would ask this board not to make it easier for an outside company to acquire and demolish a structure that belongs to this community. That's all." She sat down. The room was very quiet. Denton Creel shifted in his seat in the front row. He did not stand. Dorothy Hess looked at her board members. They conferred in low voices for about 90 seconds. Then Hess looked up. She said the board had heard the public comment and appreciated the community's engagement. She said the staff presentation had described a proposed overlay district, not a finalized one. She said the board would be tabling the proposal pending further community input and a more detailed impact assessment. She said parcels on which active improvement work was underway would be reviewed separately from the general corridor consideration. She said the hearing was adjourned. Creel stood and straightened his coat and picked up his document folio. He looked at Clara across the room. A brief look, not hostile, almost professional. The look of a man recalculating. Then he walked out. Roy Tabbert turned around in his seat and looked at Clara. He said, "What do you need done in there?" Clara looked at him. "The kitchen wiring is original and it needs to come out," she said. He nodded. "Tuesday," he said. Roy Tabbert came on Tuesday with a helper and a bag of Romex and a box of GFCI outlets and worked for 6 hours. He replaced every circuit in the kitchen area, ran a new 20-amp line from the panel, and installed a double pole breaker with a ground fault-protected outlet at every counter position. When he was done, he ran Clara through each circuit with a circuit tester, reading each result aloud. She paid him $340 in cash, which was less than a quarter of what the work was worth. He did not argue the amount. He wrote her a receipt on a folded piece of paper from his shirt pocket and said he'd be back the following Tuesday if she wanted him to look at the panel box. B. Corliss showed up on a Thursday morning with a flat of lavender starts and 2 bags of bone meal, and spent the morning planting along the foundation on the south face of the building, working in the cold with the focused efficiency of someone who knows exactly what a plant needs. She left without asking anything and without being thanked, which Clara understood was the correct way to accept the offering. Thomas Ackerman arrived on a Saturday in his pickup truck with a cord of split hardwood in the bed. He stacked it himself along the east wall of the building under the porch overhang, the splits ranked tight and clean, the bark side out. He left a business card on the porch railing that said T. Ackerman, Wood, and had a phone number. Nothing else. A plumber named Dale Wiss, who said he'd worked with Roy Tabbert on a job at Harold's Dairy in 2003, came without being called and walked through the kitchen and the back room and quoted her a price for replacing the galvanized supply lines with copper. The quote was $611. Clara looked at the number and thought about her old rent on Locust Street and said yes. Wiss came back the following week with a torch kit and a bag of half-inch copper and a new shut-off valve for the main and worked 2 days. The water ran clear. Vera was still there through all of it. She'd been sleeping on the moving blanket in the back storage room, on a camp mat Clara had found in the stone building's floor hatch, along with the second wool blanket Harold had mentioned in his letter. A better one. Vera had turned out to be 17, practical with a mop and a paintbrush, and had opinions about the placement of wall shelves that were usually correct. She worked without being directed and stopped when the work was done, and did not fill silence unnecessarily. On the second week, Clara gave her one of the ladder-back chairs for her room, the smallest of the 4. It had a card on it that said, Clara. She'll need somewhere to put people she invites in when she gets there. Clara untied the card and put it in her jacket pocket and carried the chair to Vera's room without explaining it. Vera set her backpack on it and did not ask questions. The opening was on a Saturday morning in mid-December, which was not a grand opening because Clara didn't call it one. She put a handwritten card in the window of Fenwick Hardware that said, Saturday, December 17th, Whitfield Woodworking. Free community workshop, 10 a.m. coffee provided. Adeline put a second card in the window without being asked, same text, cleaner handwriting. 9 people came, Roy Tabbert, B. Corliss, Thomas Ackerman, Dale Wiss, the plumber, a woman named Marta who worked at the grain elevator and had seen the card in Fenwick's window, 2 older men who had known Harold from the county fair circuit where Harold had sometimes entered his woodwork in the craftsman's division. a teenage boy who came alone on a bicycle and stood in the doorway for a moment before coming in. And Adeline Fenwick, who arrived last in her green canvas apron, carrying a coffee urn from the hardware store's back room. Clara had arranged the furniture in the room with care. The rocking chair was against the north wall, not as a display but as a seat, the way Harold had always intended it. The blanket chest was open, showing the cedar-lined interior. The writing desk was against the east wall with 2 chairs pulled to it. The wall shelves held a small collection of Harold's hand tools from the back crate. A block plane, a set of chisels in a leather roll, a marking gauge, a dovetail saw with a rosewood handle. She'd laid the tools out clean and oiled. On the wall above the writing desk, she had hung a single framed photograph. The photograph from her duffel bag, the one she'd taken from the apartment when the rest of Harold's things were donated. Harold standing in front of the wooden structure in soft focus, squinting into the sun. She understood now what the structure behind him was. It was the windmill. Harold had taken the photograph standing on the concrete pad, back to the tower, in the years before it fell. She'd had the photograph printed larger at a drugstore in Harnett for $8, and framed it in a simple oak frame she'd bought at a thrift store for $4. She'd hung it at eye level, centered above the writing desk, with a small card below it on a nail. Harold George Whitfield, 1942, 2023. He built this. People moved through the room quietly. They touched the furniture and looked at the tools on the shelves. Roy Tabbert stood in front of the photograph for a long time. Adeline set the coffee urn on the blanket chest and handed out paper cups. She poured one for Clara without asking and handed it over. Clara took it. The coffee was the same as it always was from Adeline's back office. Very good, very plain. The teenage boy who'd come on his bicycle was standing near the dovetail saw on the shelf, looking at it without touching it. Clara went and stood beside him. "You know what that is," she said. He shook his head. She took it carefully from the shelf and held it so he could see the blade and the spine and the set of the teeth. She explained what it did and how the brass-backed spine kept the blade from flexing on the pull stroke. She explained what a dovetail joint was and why you cut it by hand rather than by machine if you cared about the fit. He listened the way she used to listen to Harold, the few times Harold had explained things, with a quality of attention that was complete, not performing attention, but actually paying it. She set the saw back on the shelf. "Come back Saturday after next," she said. "I'm going to start a basic joinery class. First lesson is free." He looked at the saw. He looked at her. "Okay," he said. At the corner of the room, Vera was pouring coffee for Thomas Ackerman in a gray apron Clara had found in the back storage room. Vera had put it on that morning without being asked. The apron was too large. She'd folded the top hem over twice to keep it off the floor, and tied the strings twice around her waist and worked in it with the matter-of-fact practicality she brought to everything. Ackerman was saying something about Harold and the firewood, and Vera was listening, her face turned toward him, the coffee urn held in both hands, nodding in the way she'd learned to nod when people talked about Harold, with the specific attentiveness of someone learning the shape of a person she hadn't known but wished she had. That evening, Clara was in the building alone. The 9 people had gone. Vera had walked to the dollar store in town for supplies and hadn't come back yet. The coffee urn sat empty on the blanket chest. The paper cups were in a bag by the door. The tools on the wall shelf were exactly where she'd placed them. The furniture stood in the last of the winter afternoon light coming through the clean windows, the cherry wood of the blanket chest going amber in the low sun, the way it had on the first morning she'd opened the shutters. Clara went and sat in the rocking chair. She took the letter from her jacket pocket, not in the envelope now, but folded in quarters, the fold soft from being opened and reread in the night since she'd found it. She unfolded it and looked at it without reading it, because she knew it well enough now that she didn't need to read it. She just looked at Harold's handwriting, the forward-leaning print that became cursive for the longer words, pressed firmly enough that she could feel the indentations through the back of the page. She refolded it carefully. She had found, in the back of the small wooden key box, a brass-capped glass tube the length of a finger with a cork stopper. Inside the tube was a thin roll of paper she hadn't yet unrolled. She'd set it on the windowsill of the back storage room her first night in the building, and left it there, not ready for whatever it said. She went and got it now. She took it back to the rocking chair. She pulled the cork and tipped the tube, and the roll of paper slid into her palm. She unrolled it carefully. It was a single strip of paper, narrow, the kind you'd get from a receipt printer, but the text was handwritten in Harold's small, careful print. It said, "The windmill will stand again if you want it to. The lattice sections are 4-inch x 4-inch angle iron, 10 feet each. All 4 are present. The blades are salvageable." I left the anchor plate specs in the journal, page 41. I always thought it was a fine thing, the windmill. I thought you might think so too. Clara sat in the rocking chair and looked at the strip of paper for a long moment. Then she folded it and put it in her jacket pocket with the letter. The light through the clean windows was going orange and then going purple, and the shadow of the window muntins lay in long bars across the wooden floor Harold had leveled and refinished. The rocking chair moved in its quiet arc. On the wall above the writing desk, Harold squinted into the sun in front of the windmill that was still standing in that photograph, his face carrying the expression she had seen in every photograph of him, watching something the rest of them hadn't noticed yet. She watched it get dark. She thought about the 4 10-foot sections of angle iron lattice lying in the field on County Road 4, and the concrete base still standing, and the anchor bolt she'd taken the nut off with the adjustable wrench. She thought about page 41 of the journal. She thought about 4-year-old Clara Whitfield in the July sun, working at a loose board with a piece of scrap metal. Not frustrated, interested, the solution worth finding and the time it required, just part of finding it. On the writing desk, Harold had made. She was always writing things down, even as a child, even when she thought no one was watching. She had left the yellow legal pad and a pen. She could see them from the rocking chair in the last of the light. She got up. She sat at the desk and uncapped the pen and wrote, at the top of a fresh page, "Windmill. Materials list." Outside, Route 9 was quiet. The lavender starts B. Corliss had planted along the south foundation were invisible in the dark, but they were there, settled into their bone meal, waiting for spring with the patience of planted things. Thomas Ackerman's firewood was stacked clean under the porch overhang. The porch steps were plumb and solid, and Roy Tabbert's new Romex ran clean through the kitchen wall to a box that clicked off when you hit the paddle switch. Down the road on County Road 4, the stone building sat with its oil-bright hinges and its 5-gallon jug and its propane lantern, waiting in the same patient way it had been waiting since October. The windmill tower lay in the field. The concrete base stood. Inside on the front windowsill, beside the framed photograph of Harold, Clara had placed the brass key on its red tag and Adeline's diamond bow key and a small thing she'd found in the corner of the key box. A carved wooden bird, smooth with age, the kind a person makes slowly over many evenings when their hands need something to do and their mind is elsewhere. A wren, she thought, or something close to it. It sat on the sill between the 2 keys, its beak pointed toward Route 9 and the dark and the lavender and whatever came next. The porch light was on. Home is not always where you end up. Sometimes it is where you stop and look at what someone built for you in the years you weren't watching, and decide it is worth finishing. The bell above the hardware store 2 miles up the road did not ring. The building was still. Vera's light in the back room came on, a warm square visible from the road, and stayed on. The rocking chair in the main room sat where Clara had left it, the arc of its runners worn clean against the floor Harold had made level. holding the shape of the person who had sat in it long enough to understand finally that the chair had always been there.